Hello, and welcome to my media analysis of the mayoral primary election in Buffalo, New York, as covered by the New York Times and Fox News. So, a brief background on why I wanted to choose this story. Um, Long-term Mayor Byron Brown, who is described as a more moderate Democrat and definitely appeals to audiences across party lines, was beat in the Democratic primaries in Buffalo by new runner-up India Walton, a self-described Democratic socialist. This kind of sent a shockwave as Mayor Byron Brown had quite a bit of support for over a decade here in the city, and I wanted to examine through the lens of varying media outlets how they perceived this win. So let's look at where these two media outlets exist on the ideological chart. In this media bias chart, we can see that the New York Times exists much more on the left-leaning side of the columns, while Fox News is well over on the right side of the ideological chart. So quickly, I will go through the criteria I used while analyzing these articles. Text, how are the candidates referred to? What kind of words describe them? Images, how are they shown in the article? As well as information. How did the two different media outlets approach these two different candidates? Before jumping into the articles themselves, I wanted to at least look at each outlet's mission statement. Two things that stood out to me about Fox News' mission statement were the notions of compelling news as well as entertainment. I'm not sure if this would align with a objective news delivery, if a company is more concerned with how to create a more sensationalized version of the news so that it is more compelling or entertaining. On the other end, I found New York Times mission statement to be less problematic. Notions of here to help the people as well as truth, while followed by a more just society overall, seem to be more aligned with a outlet that wants to deliver objective news. So let's jump right into the headlines of these articles. We'll start with Fox News. Fox News provided the headline Defund Police Supporter Declares Victory in Buffalo Mayoral Election. Immediately, what popped out to me was that India Walton's actual name was not used, nor was the term candidate used. Fox chose to use the term defund police supporter. Now, knowing that the defund police movement is a very progressive, however, controversial and divisive topic, I felt it was problematic for an outlet to use a, such a phrase to describe a person overall. This could already implant ideas of who this candidate is and potentially mislead the viewers into what their policies will be as mayor. So now let's take a look at the New York Times headline. New York Times states India Walton stuns longtime incumbent in Buffalo mayoral primary. I felt this one to be less problematic. It at least referred to the candidate by her name, India Walton. The one detail, if I had to point out anything, the notion of the word stuns could be a slight exaggeration. We don't know if Mayor Byron Brown was exactly stunned when hearing the news, or if this was just a adjective used to kind of energize the feeling of the article. That being said, I still feel like they were able to get the news across in a rather objective method. Why I chose images as one of the criteria when analyzing these articles is partly in due to what I've learned through Clark and Mayer's The Multimedia Principle, and that we tend to have a closer grasp or a closer relationship with a story when we are given the pictorial and verbal representations. I believe that they take on equally as important roles when we are receiving information. Let's look at the image the New York Times chose to use. We can see the winning candidate for the primary, India Walton, standing in front of what looks like homes under construction. The image looks posed, it looks intentional, as if it was going to be used for some sort of promotional purpose. Now, Fox News' image that they use is a little bit more complicated to pick apart. They chose the image of India Walton the night that she realized she had won the primaries, obviously in an emotional state and excited, surrounded by friends and family. Um, there's a potential problematic quality to this in that the United States' long history of misogyny and women leaders being seen as stereotypically weak or too emotional to hold positions of authority. So this could drive a potential problematic viewing of her as a candidate. However, I'm reminded of Farhad Manjoo's notion of selective perception. I equally feel that this could be perceived as the authentic news, as India Walton did become emotional when realizing that she had won the primary. So it kind of lies within this gray area of, depending on your audience, they could perceive it as a stereotype of a woman being emotional, but at the same time, this is authentic and objectively what occurred during this event. Jumping into the opening leads of each article, we can see that Fox News again hosts some problems with using terms such as socialist right off the bat to describe India Walton, not even using the full term of democratic socialist, which is closer to her actual ideological identity, as well as bringing up the divisive topic again of reallocating funds from public police. Moving forward towards the New York Times lead, I would say there's less problems occurring in this lead. They at least refer to India Walton as a progressive challenger instead of the capital S socialist, which can be a problematic term in Western culture. Uh, However, there is a slight notion that could be perceived as a danger when you use terms like upend the political landscape. Depending on who your audience is, that could be perceived as dangerous. Now, moving into the body of the article, I'm reminded of Fox News' headline describing India Walton instead of her name as defund police supporter, only to later on in the article clarify that Walton has not used the word defund. She has advocated, though, for reallocating money from the Buffalo Police Department, which is a difference. So the misleading headline, and only to clarify with a more authentic action that's actually being taken place by that candidate, I felt like was misleading and certainly suggests a potential bias. Regarding the New York Times article, there was a potential problematic element as well. When describing how Mayor Byron Brown, upon hearing of losing the primary, uh, declined to concede initially, they plant this detail of a close ally to Governor Andrew Cuomo, who is also experiencing his bouts of controversy these days. So I felt that detail to be slightly unnecessary and could potentially lead audiences into aligning that candidate with an already controversial figure. As an audience member to these two articles, I would say that the New York Times seemed to have a more objective approach to this story. That being said, both media outlets did have elements of bias that could be found within them. I don't know if it is entirely possible to ever have journalism without a slight bias inserted into it. That being said, I think it is going to be up to us as audience members to view information with a more critical and analytical lens. With the ever changing landscape of how we receive information these days, it is increasingly important that we view any new information with a critical lens. In the Spy's reading, it states, due in part to the challenges that keep us from assessing the scale of misinformation, some scholars fear that the most harmful effect of misinformation is not that we might believe falsehoods, but that we might cease to trust any new information. So, with that being said, I feel as though it is going to be vital for us as a collective to continually hold any notion of bias accountable or misinformation accountable, so as to ensure that we still have an avenue in which to receive authentic news.